I'm Yvonne Hamoud, registered social worker and owner of New Moon Counseling, but out of the office, I'm a mom, wife, daughter, sister, and friend. Join me each week as I sit with a special guest to discuss everyday things that impact our mental health. We'll be chatting about everything from mental health and relationships to media and current events, as well as personal experiences and reflections, all in the hopes of normalizing our humanness and helping you see that you're not alone. This is Outside the Therapy Room. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Outside the Therapy Room. This is our last episode of season 2. Bittersweet, but we are very excited to kind of be off for the summer. And speaking of which, our episode today is more focused on the summer. I don't know about you guys, but I keep getting kind of bombarded with, if you start now, then in 10 weeks or in 4 weeks, you'll have a summer body. And it's a lot, and it can be a lot and very triggering for a lot of people. And so today I have Amrit here with us to talk a little bit about summer body theme and just, kind of learning to be kinder to ourselves and our bodies. Welcome, Amrit, to our podcast. How are you?
Hello, thank you. I am good. Thank you for having me here today. And hello, everyone listening in. My name is Amrit. I just want to do a little intro before we get started in the podcast today. So I am a registered social worker here in Ontario and a therapist with more of an approach on attachment and emotional connection and following more of that humanistic perspective in my work. And I did recently join New Moon Counseling. So here I support couples, teens, and individuals. Very excited and looking forward to joining this conversation today. Personally, I am someone who regularly listens to many different podcasts and audiobooks. And I find it so refreshing to be able to focus on just one of our senses, hearing, and to be able to absorb so much insight from others. It's actually quite amazing how much you can learn by simply just hearing and listening. And so I guess we're already good at that with our line of work.
Yeah.
And I think podcasts are just an incredible entertaining space as well for a lot of folks. Some of the therapist stories I've heard in previous episodes have been truly wild, but perhaps those are stories we can maybe save for another future episode. But for now, I'm just grateful to be here and getting things started today. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. It is, I think, podcasts and audiobooks are so fun because you can multitask sometimes. You can pop your headphone in and just kind of feel comforted by what you're listening to. And I know for myself, listening to podcasts, I feel less alone sometimes when I'm hearing, that people are kind of going through things that I am or are enjoying something as much as I am. So it's really cool. So thank you so much for being here. As you mentioned, you are new to our team. And so I'm very excited to have you here just for folks to kind of get to meet you, some of our listeners. But I think also our topic today is just, it can be very heavy because obviously, there's like this pressure and I don't want to single out men to say like men don't feel this pressure because I think we all feel it, but a lot more times, or I guess in this conversation, we're going to be focusing more on women and, feeling a lot of maybe body image issues, feelings of self-worth, focus on like weight loss. Like I said at the beginning on Instagram, like you're scrolling and like there's an ad on like a fitness influencer being like, if you start with me, then in 5 or however many weeks or by the beginning of summer, I can have you summer ready. What does that even mean? It can be so much and so difficult for us to escape. And so I think like every year, usually around the springtime, these messages start kind of getting very intense. Summer body ready, lose 10 pounds, like all of this stuff. So why do you think this season brings up so much anxiety about our appearance?
Well, I think there's a understanding with the warmer weather often meaning more body exposure, right? And this can look like people being more self-conscious about the way that they're already looking coming out of winter, and a lot of comparison to
Hmm.
folks that they see online relating to some of those Instagram posts you're sharing, and just other people that they're also connected with, seeing that play out on social media or on other
Hmm.
platforms, and the way that we're always constantly um, able to compare because it's there for us to.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's also this idea that I personally relate to, of it playing a role on how much we're exposed to. And I think personally relating to when I'm, maybe coming out of winter, wanting to shop for some clothes for summer or spring, there's this idea of how the body should look, even when they're promoting the clothes on these shopping websites.
Hmm.
So I think there's an overall understanding of the way we should look and our appearance, and that carries a lot of pressure with it. So I think that all of that gets amplified during these months leading up to summer and leading up to spring. And so that pressure just increases for us, right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't think, just because the temperature change that suddenly means our bodies are unacceptable.
Yeah.
But there is this big understanding in our world today that that is the case, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so hard. I think when you talk about like social media, like, there's a lot of social media marketing at play, and we're hearing a lot of influencers that we may follow use that language. Like, I'm starting to hit the gym more because I want to be ready for summer, or I want to like fit in that bathing suit or whatever the message is. And that can sometimes then trigger us to compare our bodies to theirs and the messaging that they're giving their followers, and then internalize that into how we are viewing ourselves, or how we think we are being viewed by other people. And it can just be really hard. And I think in a lot of episodes we talk about comparison maybe having a big impact on our mental health, but I think the physical comparison, like you pointed out, it can be hard not to when we're constantly bombarded with images and messaging of this kind, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's a creation of these unrealistic beauty standards that we are
Hmm.
quote unquote meant to follow,
Yeah.
right? And we often, I think a lot of us can relate to, or even have this experience of seeing there's some sort of reward on these online platforms when there's content related to appearance, right?
Hmm.
That people get more likes or people get
Hmm.
more engagement in their content because of the way that they are appearing.
Yeah.
And, that can also fall into many different categories of not just the overall appearance, but, what kind of background you come from, um, what kind of languages you're speaking, and things like that, I think can also fall into appearance and that first look of someone.
Hmm.
Um, but there's also this uh, undiscussed notion of many of these online things we see are filtered, right? And
Hmm.
they are edited or strategically taken so it looks like it's really, really nice. But the reality on the other side of the camera might look like something completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're like comparing ourselves with like not even realistic, things, especially now with AI. Like, you can change something so quickly just by typing a couple words in. And so it can, yeah, we're not even comparing ourselves with something that's real all the times. And there's so much like before and after content around too. And like you pointed out, like bodies become more visible in the summer, right? It's hot. We're wearing less things. There's an expectation. We're going to be by the pool, so we have to dress a certain way. There's just a lot. And I think this also starts at such a young age. I remember, having as a kid, like a young teen or tween, like being so nervous anytime we were getting close to the summer, because pool parties, right? Like you would be invited. And then, I remember like going to pool parties and just being wrapped up in a towel a lot of
Yeah.
the time because there's a lot of like, again, like shame. Your bodies are just developing. Like there's so much happening during that time. But then there's also like these comparisons and expectations of what your body should look like and comparisons that happen at that time too. So it's unfortunately something that all women, girls at a young age, it can start out now. They're saying there's a lot of research out there now that's saying, this, I guess like issue with body image or disliking bodies happens at a much younger age than it used to.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think there's so much truth in people even carrying memories of, looking back at their younger years, maybe in childhood or teens, like you're mentioning, and have these memories around either being teased by for the way that they looked, or
Hmm.
bullying at school for the way that they looked, and just past insecurities connected to summer experiences, and that can bring up a lot of past wounds that get opened again,
Yeah.
and kind of reintroduce that shame over and over and keep someone in that cycle.
Hmm.
And yeah, it is very unfortunate that it starts at a young age, right? And we're introduced to this beauty standard at a very young age, especially in the female population.
Hmm.
And it's something that I think we just get more exposed to as we grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, we're talking about body image here, but there's so much like, in terms of appearance, makeup, like how we do our hair, like everything, it kind of comes up. Oh man, it's so hard to be a woman. Like,
I know.
there was like that Barbie quote, like, right? We can't be, if you're too thin, then you're being told you're too thin. If you're, it's like you're no one's ever happy. Like, right?
Yes.
There's no right or wrong place, or sorry, there's no right place to be. There's always some judgment that we're feeling towards ourselves or that's coming to us. But with a lot of the time we look at someone and they can appear very confident,
Mhm.
but internally they might be struggling with their own body image sometimes. Why do you think confident people sometimes struggle with body image also?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it, right? That there can be a balance of confidence and insecurity um,
Hmm.
at the same time, or interchangeably for folks. And I think that's something that I've kind of noticed about myself personally, where we can feel a sense of accomplishment or feel a sense of love by others and care by others, and still be struggling internally with different parts of our life, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's a very interchangeable feeling between confidence and insecurity.
Hmm.
Um, and more so, the way we carry ourselves with it can either, amplify our self esteem, or it can kind of hold us back. Um, and I think that the whole understanding of body image and body image in general is such a fluctuating thing, and is so dependent on, um, things like stress, hormones, life transitions, social experiences for a lot of us. So body image um, can really fluctuate depending on all of these internal or external factors, which just leaves us to say that it's not going to be a constant feeling of always being confident or always being insecure, but both of them happening interchangeably.
Hmm. That's a good point. You're right. Like sometimes, there's moments when you can feel really confident and be very, more maybe body neutral or body positive towards yourself. And then there's other times when maybe that voice changes into a little bit more negative. So that's a good thing to kind of point out that, it is like confidence and insecurity sometimes are both existing at different times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think people who appear confident also sometimes can internalize societal beauty standards that have been engraved in us for quite some time, right? It's not
Hmm.
like it's not inevitably going to happen. But it's also, I think, taking a look at what is your definition of confidence and
Mm,
how you perceive confidence as a
mhm.
part of you. So, regardless of that struggle being present, I think it's also the way we define some of these things for ourselves, because I think that definition can definitely be subjective.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with that. What would you say are some subtle signs that someone might be struggling with body image? I mentioned like for me and a lot of people, like wrapping ourselves in blankets or towels. I've also heard from some people that they avoid some summer activities because maybe they feel uncomfortable with their bodies. What are some other signs?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there, the avoidance piece is huge for folks that may be struggling with their body image. So, um, avoiding things like taking pictures, right? Avoiding certain swimwear to wear during summer months, or if you're going on a vacation. Um, and I think there's also like a constant uh almost like obsession with checking in about your body. So
Mm,
taking a look at how you look that day, but instead of doing it once or twice, maybe throughout the day you're doing it 10 to 15 times. Maybe you're changing your outfits a lot because you're uncomfortable with what you're wearing, or you're changing your mind. um, and we often see that there's a constant need of validation or reassurance from others that,
mhm.
do I look okay? Or, we've heard it all before. Do I look fat in this? Right.
Yeah.
So that can often play a role with someone that might be struggling.
Mhm,
Um, I think of another big thing that is more vulnerable for folks to talk about is this this struggle with being present during intimacy or intimate moments,
mhm,
um, or even like intimate events like weddings or things like that, because of their worries around their appearance.
mhm,
I don't think that's solely very much talked about, but I think that is a very big thing people struggle with internally and don't really voice that to others. Um,
mhm,
Even if the other things that I mentioned can be some things that people can notice. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and with that, with the intimacy piece, it's also like like discomfort when we're being touched in certain places. Like, a partner putting their arm around you might touch you in like your quote unquote love handles, and there may
Yes.
be a discomfort, like, don't touch me there. Or, I've heard from some clients, and I've experienced this at some point in my life also of like, your partner wants to put their hand on your tummy and you're like, no, don't touch my stomach. Don't
Yes.
touch that. There can be like, again, a very big discomfort with having our partner or anybody kind of feel our bodies in certain moments, right? And that can impact the
Absolutely.
intimate moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. That's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah. So we hear this phrase, this like summer body phrase. It gets
Mhm.
thrown around constantly. What do you wish people understood about this kind of messaging?
Oh, yes. The famous summer body definition, right? I
Yeah.
think I have to say that bodies are not seasonal trends.
Hmm.
They are not something that should be, changed with the seasons that we encounter, no matter where we are in the world. Um, and like I said before, I think every body is subjective, right? So I don't think there's a true definition of summer body. Everyone carries their own understanding of what summer body is.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the body part can include so many different aspects.
Hmm.
Um, if we're not talking, physically just about the body. So and there's like this idea with summer body that many people are saying, I'm gonna just postpone getting that dress until I can fit into it, or
Hmm.
I'm gonna reschedule that outing with my friends for connection because I don't feel acceptable enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
With my own skin and the way I look to myself, right? So there can be a lot of uh, barriers that come with the quote unquote summer body.
Mm-hmm.
And I think taking a look at that as people who just say it without kind of understanding the label around it
Yeah.
can be detrimental a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like, what the heck is a summer body? To me, like a summer body is just any body that is existing during the summer. Like,
Yeah.
why does it have to have this? I think, like, again, through media, through social media, like it's just out there that, summer body means something and it looks a certain
Yes.
way. And it's just frustrating because like your body should just exist. It's just your body existing in summer. And so just kind of like having that level of acceptance, which I know can be hard,
Yes.
and it takes a little bit of time to get there. But I think with what you mentioned, kind of like the, kind of like the waiting, like I'm not going to try on that dress until I've reached this weight or until I look a certain way. There's like a diet culture then kind of plays a role in that kind of mentality. And so like I guess, what's the impact of diet culture like psychologically to us when we're kind of waiting to try things on or waiting to look or feel a certain way before we partake in an invitation?
Yeah. Such a great way of introducing this toxic diet culture that we have going on, I think,
Yeah.
in our day and age. And I think I'm speaking on it in that sense because diet culture is something that often ties in with our worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And our success or our achievement to our body. And I think it really adds a lot of pressure to us measuring that. There have been many studies that show how chronic dieting is directly correlated with risks of other types of eating disorders or anxiety or just this overall sense of guilt. So there can be a lot of direct correlations because of our diet culture on our mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, again, somehow going back into this conversation about comparison, there's an unneeded pressure here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Diet cultures are also very um, broad and can be subjective. So, personal health is something that is characterized by how that person is and the way they carry themselves. So, it can be very disjointed in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think diet culture can also create a lot of um, I think diet culture can also create a lot of um, lack of autonomy
Mm-hmm.
for kind of exploring and figuring out what does work for me individually. If you're following such a strict diet, we're not really able to explore or open up what works for us um, at an individual level that might be working better in a diet for a group of people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, so going more into like psychologically, I think it can create a lot of all or nothing thinking that,
Mm-hmm.
if I stick to this plan, then I can have all of this in due time. But if I don't, then it's kind of all lost, right?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think it can definitely be very harmful. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think about that?
No, I agree. I think with like diet culture, there's also like exercise culture of like, I think those sometimes can go hand in hand where we're like, oh, I'm going to reduce my calorie intakes, but then I'm going to work out like crazy.
Yeah.
And sometimes there is that all or nothing thinking of like, I need to work out every single day so that I can reach this, goal that I have for myself. But I think, with diet culture, okay, this is like where things get a little complicated, because I think, for like for maybe people like our age, like I know this is something I experienced, like some of those messaging and the focus on diet culture comes from our parents or our moms.
Yes.
And so that can sometimes then be something we observed and we witnessed. And now we're growing up kind of feeling like this is the only way to practice like safe weight loss, quote unquote, like safe weight loss. And then sometimes what I've heard in the therapy room is a lot of clients being like, well, I do want to lose weight, but now I'm having this message in my own head of like, no, you should just accept and love your body the way that it is. But they're like, so now I'm kind of stuck between these two places of like, full acceptance, and then like, nope, you have to like only eat 500 calories and like, go on the treadmill like every day. And so it's kind of like this complicated place now to be in,
Yeah.
where if there is this like intentional weight loss, but that it's maybe not fully tied to what their body is going to look like, but maybe is more health, maybe it is a little bit tied to like what the body's actually going to look like. They're confused and they're kind of like, that might be unhealthy, like what's happening?
Right.
And so I guess like from seeing like the all or nothing thinking that can come from diet culture for us psychologically, like can intentional weight loss and body acceptance coexist? Like, where my clients are kind of like bouncing back and forth between these two kind of mindsets. It can be hard to kind of, place this intentional weight loss while at the same time having body acceptance. So I guess like, is that possible? Can that happen?
I think as a shorter answer, yes. I think
Yeah.
body acceptance doesn't really mean giving up on our goals entirely. I think the two biggest things to kind of reduce in the process of hitting those goals is how can I reduce my shame and my hatred, that I
Mm,
have going on during this process too, right?
yeah.
Because when we don't follow through with the diet, or when we don't follow through with just eating healthy for the day or for the week, we are hard on ourselves.
Mm,
And that comes with the piece of shame, right, that
yeah.
um that we know wraps up into our identity, right? And so if we can kind of work on decreasing those emotions that come through too, then I think we can pursue healthier goals, by still you know offering ourselves that self respect at every stage of hitting
Mhm.
those goals, right? And because we often talk about this in our therapy rooms with acceptance and commitment therapy, right? About
Mhm.
how acceptance often creates more um, long-term change, more sustainable change, because that shame level, or that very loud volume in our head about shame, um, it comes down, right? The more that
Yeah.
we go into acceptance. Um, and so if we kind of allow ourselves to fall into acceptance, I think it can, help to decrease some of those amplified thoughts, negative thought spirals that we have around our weight loss. Um,
Mhm.
I found this quote on my socials the other day on my page, and it said that you don't have to earn compassion through weight loss, right?
Mhm.
That self-compassion and giving ourselves grace or showing up for ourselves in that way does not mean that you are failing in any way, right?
Mhm.
um, but there's often this understanding that because I am, um, not who I'm quote unquote supposed to be, or doing what I'm supposed to be doing, then, shame gets really loud and starts saying things. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that quote. And I
Yeah.
think, with what you said, um, like there is hatred sometimes towards our bodies that is kind of what's driving the need for weight loss. So the diet culture, all of these things, but we can approach the same goal, so to lose weight, but the mentality around it is the big thing, right?
Yeah.
When we look at like movement and nutrition, that's coming from a place of care, not
Mhm.
hatred. And so there can be, I think it's like, yeah, to answer like the original question, like you
Mhm.
said, yes, but it really does kind of come from the mental place of how are we talking to ourselves when we do this? Are, a lot of the time it's, in diet culture, it can be punishment. Like, I don't deserve to eat this, like, birthday cake because I didn't do well with my calorie intake this week or whatever it could be. So there is a lot more of that more negative place. And we're thinking that that's going to lead to positive motivation, but it actually doesn't. Or it can lead us more into that shame, like you mentioned. So I think,
Yes.
yes, they can coexist. It just is kind of the mentality that we have around it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, such a personal level of growth for myself taking a look at this. We need to show up for ourselves in a more compassionate way, and just be kinder to ourselves overall. I think I lived, even for myself, I lived in this mindset of not hitting my goals in the way I look, or even just being uncomfortable in my own body for a long time. And let me tell you, when that switch happens, you really feel it, that
Mm-hmm.
I am no longer going to put myself down, right? And
Mm-hmm.
knowing that this is the only body I have. And
Mm-hmm.
um, the headspace we live in is a headspace we live in more than any other space we live in,
Yeah.
for the entirety of our life. So, please try and make sure that it can be as positive as possible for yourself, at least, if not for other
Mm-hmm.
relationships. Um, just trying to carry myself forward as a way that I would look at my younger self, right?
Yeah.
And kind of playing that childhood lens in what we do with work with clients, and kind of unpacking the way that she deserved to be treated is still the way that you deserve to be treated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying this is a switch that happens overnight. It takes a lot of um, intention, and it takes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of practice to be able to fill yourself with experiences that are more welcoming and more compassionate. Um, but living on this side of it is a lot more calming and just
Mm-hmm.
more attuning to, not just surviving and getting by, but just being comfortable and being okay with the way you carry yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that because, yeah, again, I don't think there's one woman you might find that hasn't had some kind of experience with disliking their body or having some of those thoughts. And I agree with you. We're in our head our whole lives. Like that
Yes,
is,
we
let's try
are.
to make it a safe and cozy space for us to be in
Yeah.
instead of such a critical, hatred kind of place. But a lot of our mentality about ourselves and our body feels like it's all kind of, things that we're experiencing for ourselves. But I think how we are kind of moving through life with some of our own body image issues or some limitations that we may put impact our relationships as well. Like we
Yeah.
pointed out earlier, right? If we're feeling, not good about maybe our belly or our arms or our legs or whatever, that can come up again in
Yes.
intimate moments with our partner. It can also show up in our friendships in terms of the comparisons that we can make, the suggestions we may provide, or as we've also discussed, it can lead to canceling
Yeah.
appointments, canceling get-togethers, all of these things that are going to then affect our relationships. Yeah, how else can poor body image affect relationships and self-esteem?
Yeah, very important to discuss this part of body image as well, because now this is impactful in other parts of your life, like you're sharing. relationships that we have with other people, not just the relationship we have with ourselves.
Mhm.
So yeah, like you mentioned, many people who struggle with poor body image could potentially withdraw from social events, right? And try
Mhm.
and avoid that vulnerability, simply because usually the underlying core belief is that they're quote unquote not good enough, right?
Mhm.
Um, and so we see that it can, of course, affect the way that we communicate with others or the way that we show up for others, right? But also, it can really impact the emotional safety that we feel in a relationship. Going back to the point of not wanting to be touched in a particular spot in our body, and not feeling emotionally safe with the other person to do so. So, not even on a physical level, right? We can
Mhm.
have poor body image, but in an emotional and even mental level, right? All of
Mhm.
these different layers can definitely add to that self esteem. Um, and I think some people tolerate some of the unhealthy relationships they're in because self worth really, really feels like it's tied to validation, right?
Mhm.
So when someone's worth becomes appearance based, relationships start feeling very performative.
Mhm.
Like I have to be a certain way or I have to look a certain way in order for this person to really like me or not leave me, this sense of feeling abandoned. So
Mhm.
to keep up with that, it's almost like I can't show up as my authentic self. It has to be something like a performance, which I'm sure you can relate to
Mhm.
professionally as well. We've seen this many times,
Yeah.
even with our clients and some of the stories they have to share about their relationships.
Yeah, and then it can kind of create this unauthenticity, like you're not able to be authentic anymore, or what I've heard also actually like in and outside of the therapy room, even with some friends, is like my partner is getting tired of me, or my partner is saying that like I'm making them not feel good because I'm constantly asking for validation, or I'm making these comparisons out loud and they're not feeling good about the comparisons that I'm making. So it can it can impact relationships. I think even for folks who are dating or being intimate, it also does the
Yeah.
same thing, right? We can become like obsessive in comparison. We can
Mhm.
maybe tune into one part of our bodies and really be vocal about the validation that we are needing from other people. There can be a lot of body checking, plans being canceled. Avoiding photos is a big thing
Yeah.
that I've heard, or feeling really good in the moment. Then somebody snaps a picture and then you see it later and you're just,
Hmm. Yes.
that's all you can think about and you kind of
Yep.
obsess over the photo.
Hmm.
That can be really challenging, but there's just so many ways that it can impact our relationships. I think underneath like and something we've talked about, like the shame, disliking how our body looks, it all kind of goes to not feeling good enough. And so when we are feeling like we're not good enough, we might even feel like we're undeserving of
Hmm.
love or a healthy relationship or of confidence. Or we can start to not believe or question our partner or friends when they're telling us positive
Yeah.
feedback, right? When they're like, you look amazing, you look great, we might get very aggressive in telling them
Hmm.
like, no, we don't, stop lying to me. And then that can create a lot of conflict with the people in our lives. So I do think, even though we look at body image as it being just us, it actually has a lot of impact with our surroundings, our environment, our community, our people. Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think there's this behavior of being hyper aware during
Hmm.
intimacy when
Hmm.
you're more focused on maybe some of that body image struggle, right? Instead of staying emotionally present with the experience of being intimate or
Yeah.
whatever is happening in that place, it's I need to be hyper aware of the way I'm presenting right now, or the way that I appear. Am I slouching, right? Is my stomach in enough? Am I, all of these different things. So again, like you said, we go up into our thoughts, right? And we kind of completely disregard what's happening presently with us.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's like it happens in on so many different levels for us, and so many
Yeah.
external levels, that this topic is something that is so deeply rooted in healing that, right,
Yeah.
and coming out of that. And I think throughout this discussion, it's really important to also highlight that, you know coming out of a negative body image for yourself is something that is is not solely your responsibility, right? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of the times we think as individuals it's all on us, or it's all on our plate, taking in the pressure of societal beauty standards, or our own families' inputs of our bodies, or the way we've carried ourselves in our lifetime with
Mm-hmm.
them. I think we have to broaden that perspective of, this isn't solely going to be fixed by just me, right?
Mm-hmm.
this is a this is a issue, or a topic that needs many layers of support,
Mm-hmm.
right? So even if you're trying to better your mindset, or have a positive body image for yourself, there also are your friends that are involved, your spouse or your partner that's involved,
Mm-hmm.
and all of these other things that can add to us kind of going on that healing journey. Just wanted to say that piece too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because I think that is so true. I think the people that we surround ourselves with also have an influence in how we view ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, how we think about ourselves.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very important who we surround ourselves with too. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess as we're kind of moving into kind of, okay, what do we do now kind of place? Like, what are some healthier ways for us to think about our bodies?
Yes, let's get into what can we do about this now.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think I think the number one thing we can do is kind of give ourselves the permission to shift from kind of like going from only thinking about your appearance to, what do I actually provide myself, other than looking the way I look? So
Hmm.
questions like, what allows me to live, connect, move, and experience life? Rather than just focusing on appearance, we're kind of shifting to, what is the function, right?
Hmm.
What is it providing you? Or what are you doing in your life that also adds to some of the values you carry for yourself? Um, the other thing that is, again, very big in my practice with clients is just being able to hold space for gratitude. And, I think when we're very far on the comparison wagon, we sometimes let things fall through that we do have, and we get to celebrate, or get to look at in a positive light. So I think gratitude is a healthier way we can
Hmm.
think about our bodies. And the last thing is to look at our body image as a relationship we have with ourselves, instead of um, like a project that we need to work on, right? We are not
Hmm.
projects, we are human beings, and
Yeah.
we all carry a relationship with ourselves. So um, viewing ourselves in that relationship, and wanting to grow in that relationship, and
Hmm.
um, grow in a healthier way, rather than seeing it as something that you need to fix as a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the gratitude. I use that a lot with clients, but more focused on like gratitude for body function. So, like,
Yes.
I'm grateful that these arms are, here so I can hug my kids, so I can carry my
Yeah.
kids, so I can hug my partner, whatever it is, I'm thankful for my legs for getting me from one place to another. So sometimes kind of practicing the functionality of it, like you pointed out,
Mm-hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
just the appearance, can kind of just shift that perspective for us. But I think for a lot of people, jumping right straight to things that they love about their bodies can be really hard. And I
Yeah.
think something important to remember that's more like body neutral is like, you don't have to love every part of your body in
Mm.
order to respect yourself. Like,
Yes.
there's days when I wake up and I'm not feeling the greatest, but there is, at least one thing that I can say, I really like my hair today, or I really like how I did my makeup, or I really like what I'm wearing. And I'm not
Yeah.
focusing in on the thing that, maybe is bothering me. But I think it's unrealistic for us to say we have to love ourselves
Yes.
100, like 24/7. There's going to be moments, and that's okay, as long as
Yes.
we're compassionate with ourselves through it. But no, I really like kind of what you mentioned in terms of like how we can kind of shift perspective in terms of how we're talking to ourselves. I
Yes.
Like we said, there's a lot of appearance-based self-worth. How can we challenge when those kind of messages internally come up for us?
Yeah, I think uh, something I want to share that I do on a personal level as well is kind of expand who I am as a human being, expand my quote unquote identity beyond what I look on the
Mm-hmm.
outside and my appearance, right? So, values that we hold as human beings on an individual level can really challenge some of those appearance based self worth beliefs that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I may look a certain way, but that doesn't take away from the values I hold around creativity, or
Mm-hmm.
values I hold around humor, or just the resiliency that all of these wonderful women in our life carry. So I think taking a step back and expanding the way you perceive yourself
Mm-hmm.
is huge. um, and also, like, um I've been doing this more of a practice where I will offer compliments that are not appearance focused, um
Yeah.
and more character focused or value focused. And so it's also like I am in that practice of offering others this challenge of, hey, I want to point out something that's not your appearance, right? And I think that just allows me to expand living in that perspective and mindset.
Mm-hmm.
um, I think it goes back to this quote that I found. It went something like, what I believe a loved one's worth is dependent on their size, right? And kind of pointing that back at myself, that
Mm-hmm.
would I love my best friend, or would I love one of my cousins differently because she looked different, right? And the answer is no. And kind of using that same dialogue with ourselves too, and
Mm-hmm.
challenging some of those negative core beliefs that come into play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that redirect. Again, it's a redirect, right? Like, how would you
Yes.
talk to your friend? Like,
Exactly.
what would you think in this way? And I guess that's one way to kind of look at our negative thoughts when they start spiraling,
Mhm.
kind of like really see like, what is this something that you would say to a good friend?
Right.
How would we feel if a friend was saying this to us, or whatever it could be? But what are some other things people can do when those negative thoughts are really feeling heavy and spiraling?
um yeah, I think the most important thing is to be more aware that those negative thoughts or spirals are happening. Our first line of work is always increasing that sense of awareness for folks. If we don't know that it's even happening, then we have very little wiggle room to change it or shift it in
Mm-hmm.
any way.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure you've all heard this before, but if you haven't, it's more of a how can I just pause, right? Because when we do spiral and we're all up, in the tornado of our thoughts, it happens very fast. It happens in a blink of an eye. And I think if we can take a moment to pause, um, and kind of walk ourselves through the thought instead of like wrapping ourselves up in the thought or completely believing the thought,
Hmm.
it can allow us to, take some space between a thought and how we want to show up or that feeling that's about to come in.
Hmm.
Um, and also, because we're talking about body image, I think it falls in perfectly, really focusing on your body sensations and cues,
Hmm.
more going into somatic practices here, but um, things like just things like being more aware of how does my body react when I'm activated or when I'm overwhelmed, or how do I perceive myself? What do I say to myself when I don't hit a goal or when I look in the mirror, right?
Hmm.
And I think tapping into our body allows us to reconnect in that way that some of us don't like to connect with our bodies because of that uncomfortableness that we feel, right? Um, and something I often say to myself a lot of the times that is that our all of our thoughts are not facts, right?
Hmm.
So it's very important, even talking about body image, because we are so easily convinced or believed, by the things that we say, because we're taking it from external factors like we talked about social media or other platforms.
Hmm.
Um, so that influence is very great already. Uh, so I think kind of pausing and grounding ourselves in our bodies, and also just taking a moment to reflect back if that thought was actually true, right? Is that a fact? Or is this thought just a thought going through my head and I don't have to catch it?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. Sometimes we need to give ourselves those reminders, like that redirection. I don't need to catch this thought. I can just kind of hold it, let it go. It is a lot easier said than done. So
Yes.
please be patient with yourself. This is new. It's new kind of wiring that we kind of have to practice if
Yeah.
we've been kind of just stuck in this negative spiral of thinking. It's going to take a little bit of time for us to kind of practice some of the tools to kind of have more compassion towards ourselves or to see things a little bit differently.
Yes.
Um, but I think a lot of people kind of, this was me at one point, like put our
Mhm.
lives on pause, waiting to feel better about ourselves physically. So
Yes.
like when I feel really good about myself, then I can do this, or then I will be happy. And really all it does is just keeps us from experiencing things because life is still happening while we wait. Like
Yeah.
memories, relationships, like happiness, all of these things are happening now, not, 10, 20 pounds from now. So I think it's really important to kind of just be in the moment and,
Mhm.
practice that gratitude like we talked about.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think like as we head into the summer, just, taking a little break, kind of pausing, like you said,
Mhm.
listening to ourselves, practicing some of that self-compassion. But I guess like for folks who maybe don't practice self-compassion right now, like how can people use self-compassion this summer?
Yeah, great tool. Great tool, especially for things like body images. And so the first thing that we kind of talked about was this understanding of the way you speak to yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we say this in therapy world as speak to yourself as you would
Mm-hmm.
be speaking to someone you deeply care about, which we just talked about. And I
Mm-hmm.
think we use that notion because we know that we are so engraved the other way, right?
Yeah.
That we are so down on ourselves and so hard on ourselves that we can't see ourselves in that light yet. right? So can we use that tool of, maybe if you don't think about it, as yourself, and replace that person as someone you deeply care about, kind of
Mhm.
going into IFS here in parts work. But,
Yeah.
can we do some of that work to bring out positivity in you, right? And use that tool. Um, and I think kind of challenging ourselves in a way that I'm also doing is, wearing clothes that fit our current bodies,
Yeah.
and showing up as we are, right? And instead of, like you said, kind of earning or waiting to wear them or be in them, we just
Mm.
show up, right? A part of
Yeah.
accepting that this is who I am now, right? And I'm learning to be okay with it. But the learning is only done when we are kind of going into exposure and doing that for us,
Mhm.
right? So, something that I will also be following this summer, not throwing out the old clothes and,
Yeah.
getting on my laptop and doing some shopping, but trying to just slow down and accept my body how it is, and also like continue working on it, right?
Mhm.
We can be a work in progress and
Mhm.
masterpiece at the same time. A very famous
Yeah.
quote, I'm sure we all know. Um, but yeah, and like, of amazing quote. Sorry, so many quotes today, but I just wanted to also share this one I found specifically on body image, that you are allowed to take up space in summer exactly as you are.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
Beautifully put. And sometimes we do need to give ourselves that permission that we haven't for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna share a quote also, since we're sharing quotes. On
Yes.
the podcast, Not Gonna Lie with Kylie Kelsey, she brought up a really good point. I guess maybe it's not a quote, but something she said was like, nobody knows the size that you're wearing. They just see it on you, right? Like the size of our clothing is on the inside. It's not
Yes.
visible to anyone else. So it doesn't matter what size you're wearing, because the clothing is meant to fit our bodies, not the other way around. And so buy the pants that fit you, regardless of the size. You'll feel more comfortable and cozy in them,
Yeah.
instead of like squeezing into a size that is too small just because we're worried about the number.
Mhm.
So yeah, I love that message on that podcast. But I really like your message too. It's just, yeah, we just need to be a little nicer to ourselves and practice some of the things. And like you said, we're all a work in progress. I know I have to remind myself of some of these things also
Yes.
as we kind of just move through it. But are there any final messages that you want to give to someone, maybe one of our listeners who are struggling with body image right now?
Yes, I did. Just want to end off by, sharing that if you are struggling with any of the topics that we discussed today in the podcast, we want you to know that there is support for you, always, and that you are not
Mhm.
alone in this. Yvonne and I have shared many personal experiences with body image, even for ourselves.
Yeah.
So please reach out if we can be that support for you. And we have also linked many of our resources in this podcast for you to also
Mhm.
take a look at.
Yeah, on the show notes. So
Yes.
we'll also have Amrit's information. You are accepting new clients right now. Is that right?
Yes, I am accepting new clients in person in Waterloo and virtually all over Ontario. So if you are interested to book a consultation and have a chat, please reach out. You can follow me on my social media page on Instagram called Regulate and Relate. And I post more therapy related content on that page. So
Hmm.
follow along if you're interested.
Yeah, we'll have, like I said, all of that's going to be in the show notes. So it's a quick click and follow for everyone. But I hope you are all gentle with yourselves this summer. Just focus on the memories. being there, enjoying all of the things that the summer has to bring you. And Amrit, thank you so much for such an honest conversation and a lot of amazing quotes that you shared with us. Thank you to everyone listening. Thank you so much for being here and supporting us through season 2. I can't believe we have 2 seasons down now. And we will be back in the fall with season 3. We already have some guests lined up for that. So I'm excited for you to kind of get a chance to listen to that in the fall. This summer, there's a little bit of traveling happening for me. So I hope, to share a little bit of that through our social media pages on Outside the Therapy Room Pod and at New Moon Counseling KW. So feel free to follow those to kind of tune into what I'm doing this summer. And again, thank you all so much for being here. Can't wait to come back for season 3. But until then, thank you so much. Take care, mentally, emotionally, physically, all the ways, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks so much, Amrit.
Thanks so much, Yvonne. Everyone, take good care, and we'll see you next time.
Have a good summer.
Thank you for listening to Outside the Therapy Room. This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. If you reside in Ontario and are interested in working with one of our therapists, please visit our website in the show notes. If you reside outside of Ontario, a quick Google search or search through Psychology Today will help you find a therapist near you.